So, a very good evening to all of y'all. Thank you for your precious time. On behalf of INSARG and ALMA, we all would like to welcome you for this webinar, the second webinar in series of the unspoken problem. Today, we have with us two eminent doctors, gynecologists, who are going to take us through their experiences and their expertise on two very intriguing topics. So we have with us Dr. Tanuja Huchal. Dr. Tanuja Huchal is the founder of the OMA Hospital in Mumbai. She is the treasurer of INSARG, and her interests are in cosmetic gynecology and reproductive medicine. We have Dr. Ragini Agarwal from Delhi, a very senior gynecologist. She is the founder of the Pratiksha Hospital and the president-elect of INSARG and the ex-president of Foxy. So with this, I request Dr. Tanuja Uchal to begin her topic. Dr. Tanuja Uchal's topic would be Legacy of Aesthetic Gynecology, a Walk Through Time. And then this will be followed by a senior doctor, Dr. Ragini Agarwal. So I welcome you all and request Dr. Tanuja Uchal to begin her topic, please.
Hello everyone, a very good evening to all of you and a very warm welcome for all the colleagues who are attending this webinar. As I was preparing for this topic, I say this time and again, I stumbled upon some very interesting facts unknown to many on a subject that has infused PRP into gynecology and is now rejuvenating its very soul. But every time I revisit history, I get some new inputs and new insights into it, which manages to stun me time and again. Let us begin with what aesthetic is all about. Aesthetic is derived from the Greek word aesthetikos and literally meant relating to the perception by the senses. Aesthetic refers to the appearance of something, particularly in relation to its beauty. Societies across time have valued beauty, and they have also classified them. Standards of beauty are arbitrary and they vary greatly from one culture to another and from time to time. People have always been concerned about their external appearances since the beginning of civilization. And to offer such people a better look, doctors of ancient times also took efforts to find new ways to rejuvenate and renovate themselves, thus getting into form aesthetic surgeries. In those times, piercing, scarification, tattooing were quite popular. People used specialized techniques to change the looks in a better way by injecting, ripping, snipping, stitching to make the body parts look more beautiful and more smooth. And that is the birth of reconstructive surgeries. In ancient India, there was a surgeon by the name of Shushruta, whom I'm sure everybody is very well versed with. And he was arguably the first cosmetic surgeons of the world. In this book, he clearly mentions that plastic surgeries were in existence in India in the 10th century BC. Shushruta was the first one to perform skin grafts. He and his disciples used pieces of skin from other parts of the body to graft it on the face to correct the look of a person. Shushruta followed the skin and vessel-rich graft technique to perform some revolutionary reconstructions, including labiaplasty. That gets me to a twist of female sexuality in India, the Rati Rahasya. Function is a critical element. Aesthetics should be both derived from and assist in the function of the design. From serves function, and this is from where the ancient Indian test on female sexuality sheds light. The now patented technologies of the G-shot and the O-shot were well patented in the Rati Rahasya. The age-old tradition of herbal smoking to tighten and rejuvenate the vagina is akin to the laser vaginal surgeries of today. This is an excerpt from the book. We move on to the Egyptians. The Egyptians were great admirers of beauty and left us with a large historical record of efforts to enhance their physical appearance. However, their treatment of the genitalia was something very different, and that treatment is a precursor to the female genital mutilation. Next, we peek into the Greco-Roman era, where Soranus and Paulos describe techniques for excision of the hypertrophic clitoris and excision of the enlarged labia minora. As we move to the medieval era, suturing of vaginal lacerations at childbirth formed the basis of modern vaginoplasty techniques. The procedure was first described in 1050 AD by a female physician, Trotula di Ruggiero, of La Scuola Medica, the first medical school in Europe. She wrote treatments for women as well as contributions to other work, the Ornato Mullerium, Women's Cosmetics, which in addition to two other works written subsequently by medieval physicians, comprise a compendium known as the Trotula. The Renaissance. Pierre Dionys describes labiaplasty in the 1600s. Roderico Castro describes clitoridectomy by horsehair ligature at the same time. The Renaissance brought major advances in our knowledge of anatomy. And this knowledge got widely disseminated owing to the fact that this time was the time of the advent of the printing press. Lawrence Heister described labia minora plasty in detail in 1739. But if you go by the description of the surgery, it seems a little gruesome. The early 20th century saw very little advancements, nothing much, and nobody interested in improving women's health. Cosmetic gynecology in recorded history, if I put it into a nutshell. Vaginal rejuvenation or tightening is over 1,000 years old according to Western philosophy, and it was conceived by women. Clitoroplasty in the Western world was performed for appearance only through the 18th century. Labiaplasty was an established treatment for both symptomatic and aesthetic concerns by the late 17th century. Let us walk through the labiaplasties. This is how it all began. In 1975, an Ohio surgeon, Dr. James Burt, published the book, The Surgery of Love, the first of its kind to describe the vaginoplasty and hodectomy procedures. In 1978, the European Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology published the first ever paper mentioning labiaplasty entitled Benign Enlargement of the Labia Minora. 1984, medical literature begins to mention cosmetic vaginal surgery, namely in the journals of Plastic Reconstructive Surgery. 1996, Dr. Matlock performs the first vaginal rejuvenation, which he later patents and trademarks. 1988 to the 2000s, vaginoplasty and labiaplasty become the key subjects of mainstream articles in Cosmopolitan and the Marie Claire. 2005, Dr. Alan Sword invents the Barbie, or the smooth genital area look with no visible labia minora. 2007, the American College of Obstetrician Gynecologists addressed the procedure by publishing a statement noting that women should be informed about the pros and cons of cosmetic procedures as well as the potential risks and complications. 2011, the British Journal of Medicine reports that 40% of women which they had sampled desired some sort of vaginal rejuvenation. 2012, close to 2,000 vaginal surgeries are being performed in the United States alone. The American Society of Plastic Surgery no longer keeps the statistics on the procedure, but the numbers continue to rise rapidly every year. I now move on to hymenoplasty. Hymenoplasty is one of the most sought after surgery in aesthetic gynecology. Why would someone seek reconstruction of a torn hymen? The intact hymen is long held as a sign of virginity. Deviation from this Hegemonic religious expectation has harmful repercussions on the woman, which ranges from shame to honor killing. This misconception must have originated probably because of its phonetic resemblance to the word hymn. Both of these are Greek words, hymen and hymn. The word hymen means membrane, as is evident from terms such as hymenology, anatomical study of membranes. Appropriately, membranous remnant of the vagina was known as hymen vaginalis. On the other hand, the word hymn, frequently misspelled as hymen in English, by translators and in the English translation, refers to a minor Greek god in Greek mythology. He is believed to preside over marriage by holding a torch in his hand. Invocations sung during marriage ceremonies in honor of this god were originally called as hymn. As virginity ends with the consumption of marriage or consummation of marriage, hymn was mistakenly associated with chastity. The god hymn has no influence on sexual intercourse of people. Therefore, linking hymen vaginalis with virginity appears to be a mythological misinterpretation. But here, today, we have to refer to the social conditions of the woman and why she is asking or requesting for a hymenoplasty. I just wanted to go back to history to actually tell you where and how the misinterpretation of this word took place. With surgical procedures evolving, the technology for improving these procedures also evolved. That is the rise of the machine age. This is our present current scenario. Among the new modalities being applied to feminine rejuvenation, CO2-based or erbium lasers and radiofrequency-based energy devices came into vogue. By harnessing laser or RF waves to heat the connective tissue of the vaginal wall to 40 degrees or 42 degrees, these energy-based devices aim to induce collagen contraction, neocollagenesis, vascularization, and growth. Factor infiltration that ultimately revitalizes and restores the elasticity and moisture of the vaginal mucosa. The first carbon dioxide laser came into the market in the 1960s and was soon adopted for cosmetic use. These early lasers use selective photothermolysis to target specific tissues with a specialized wavelength of light. This technique involved and remained the gold standard to the 90s. Erbium lasers were later developed to reduce the downtime. This technique had high water absorption abilities and was considered superior at that time. However, effects like hypopigmentation, which were very prevalent and which the researchers had not anticipated, causing erbium to fall out of favor or fall into slight disrepute. Not long after the introduction of the fractional laser in 2004, experts called it the anti-aging breakthrough of the decade. Fractional CO2 lasers offer many benefits of previous laser technologies, but with fewer side effects and significantly less downtime. This boosts natural collagen without significant damage to the top layer of the cell. Aesthetic gynecology has advanced from scalpels, the wands, and the use of fillers, including PRP, toxins, and their combinations. Surgical vaginoplasty involves surgical vaginal tightening and the correction of vaginal damage or deformity. It involves a full-length tightening of the vagina, not just at the introitus. Non-invasive procedures for tackling symptoms of GSM are increasingly emerging in the form of energy-based devices and injectable agents such as fillers and PRP. G-spot amplification, which was empirically developed to make the G-spot more prominent and hence increase friction, which leads to better chances of a vaginal orgasm. Bulking the sensitive area towards the vaginal lumen for greater friction and contact may lead to easier, longer, and more frequent and intense orgasms. Combination treatments have been increasingly adopted for the comprehensive care of patients with aesthetic and medical concerns. For vaginal rejuvenation, commonly proposed combination treatments include energy-based devices with PRP, energy-based devices with surgery, energy-based devices and fillers, and a combination of energy-based devices. PRP is the most common rejuvenating injectable used in various parts of the body. PRP has been combined with energy-based devices as follows. PRP being applied after microablative lasers as rejuvenating liquid in the vagina. PRP is injected in the clitoroureteral vaginal space for better orgasms and also for managing stress urinary incontinence. This led to the O shot, which was patented by Ronels. With surgical vaginal tightening, the tissues are cut and resutured in layers with support that leads to the structural and physical tightening. However, because energy-based devices improve the functionality of the tissues, they can be offered to patients after a surgical vaginoplasty to improve elasticity and vaginal mucosa. With surgical vaginal tightening, the tissues are cut, resutured in layers with support that leads to structural and physical tightening. However, because of energy-based devices improve the functionality of the tissues, they can be offered to patients after a surgical vaginoplasty to improve elasticity. Some clinicians combine laser devices with RF and use laser in the vaginal canal and RF for the introidal area and the vulva. With the legacy of postpartum rituals that primarily takes care of vaginal health, both form and function, in India, there is an easy adaptation to new technology and techniques. There is an increased awareness on improving the quality of life fueled by the higher incomes as compared to the previous generations. Also, more and more women from the upwardly mobile middle class have an independent source of income, enabling them to spend for the right-looking genitals. A survey conducted by the International Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery ranks India the number 4 in the top 5 countries in the world whose nationals are opting for plastic surgery to enhance their physical appearance. In almost no time, India has actively occupied this beauty space and has scaled to the top in cosmetic surgery market across the world. Due to the high cost of these procedures in the developed countries and lack of inclusion of cosmetic surgery in health insurance in their countries, patients travel to India for a cost-effective option. Interestingly, the domestic market demands more than equals the discerning foreigner. What I realized is over the years, CO2 laser has become a very versatile tool in our hands. I just wanted to share a few slides with the before and the after images of patients whom I have treated so that people can know how we can improve the quality of a person's life. This was my experience with the Verruca plana, with the light scan for vaginal lightening for a patient who had come prior to her wedding, who also opted for a hymenoplasty. This is seborrheic keratosis of a patient with labia, at her labia. Another patient with a skin tag removal. And this was for a patient who was not happy with her appearance of her labia majora. So tightening and skin rejuvenation for that patient. Desire and the pursuit of perfection. In conclusion, the lines between medically necessary operations such as vaginal pelvic constructive surgery and elective surgeries such as vaginoplasty and labiaplasty are blurring and can now be performed at the same time. Both function and beauty are becoming addressed together and not separately. Minimal complication rates and maximum patient satisfaction can be achieved if experienced, trained physicians are involved. I go to the sculpture of the Great Wall of the Vagina, a sculpture made from plaster casts of 400 women's vulvas. Spectacle and education together. Knowledge is power. Freedom from genital anxiety is the goal. This wall was created to shame the aesthetic surgeons for wanting to change the parts of a woman's genitalia. I believe otherwise. It is the patient who has to decide what she wants for herself. The society nor the doctors can decide what we want for our patients. It is their perspective, it is their prerogative. With a rich legacy of cosmetic reconstructive surgeries of the pelvic region, not only in India, as you have seen, but in the rest of the world, it is time that we get out of the Victorian shackles and recognize cosmetic gynecology as a subspecialty, and therefore invest in introducing more people to it and training more people for it. Here, I would like to thank everybody for a very, very, very patient hearing.
Thank
Very
you.
nice,
Thank you,
Tanuja.
Tanuja. Yeah, Preeti. Hello, Dr. Narendra here.
Hi,
Hello,
sir.
sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for the lovely walk down the history of cosmetic and aesthetic gynecology, and to tell the participants, which we have over 100 year now, that we have the Indian Society of Aesthetic and Regenerative Gynecology, and you can see Dr. Preeti, the secretary, is there, and Dr. Tanuja is in the executive, and the next speaker would be Ragini, who's the vice president. Yes, Tanuja, your comments now. Yes, Preeti, your comments. Sorry.
Tanuja, very nice and very educative, and many new things I learned, though I've been practicing for so long cosmetic gynae. The history of hymen and its origin was really, really very interesting. Thank you for enlightening us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tanuja Uchal, for taking us through this time walk through cosmetic gynecology. And now I would request our senior doctor, Dr. Ragini Agarwal, to share her experiences and take us through the genitourinary syndrome and her observations and her management plans.
Just a minute, please. It is not coming here. ELT. Is it open on your?
Ma'am, if you could share the screen, ma'am. So the option is right below, ma'am, on the screen.
Very good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for being here in a big number. And this is the second episode of INSARG ELMA combined series in aesthetic regenerative gynecology. I welcome you on behalf of INSARG as a president-elect.
Good evening, Dr. Ragini. Good evening.
Sir, hello, sir. We are honored by your presence. And when we talk about the cosmetic gynecology, aesthetic gynecology, it creates lots of controversies. Especially as Tanuja has very, very apt said, that Victorian outlook. And if you see that so many years behind 2000 BC, 3000 BC, we are doing everything. So it is nothing new. It is just an old wine in a new package with more, which has gone in the shackles, and we have come out of the shackle. The second thing which I'm going to talk, it is nothing to do with the so-called wish of the woman as for the beauty. It is something a very, very functional problem for which women suffer unnecessarily, silently, without thinking that she has some treatment about for that. So very aptly, we have made the name of this series is Her Unspoken Problem. So as far as the genitourinary syndrome of menopause is concerned, that 50% of the postmenopausal women may be affected by GSM, and many women not report to these symptoms because they are embarrassed or unaware that their symptoms are related to menopause, or believe that their symptoms are just an inevitable part of aging. It's an eternal truth. Every woman has to pass the menopause, and almost 50% is going to a variable symptom of the GSM, which they suffer without having any relief. So almost 84% women say their symptoms interfere with their lives, and 12% say they interfere a great deal or debilitating. A huge number of people are suffering, and most common symptoms have 50% of the hot flashes, but yes, 38% have vaginal dryness also. 42% of them say that they never discuss with their healthcare provider. So actually, what is genitourinary syndrome of menopause? It is nothing. All three main symptoms which a woman suffer is a combined and given and comes under one umbrella, that is genital symptoms, dryness, burning and irritation. Sexual symptom, which is very, very important. We can't uh, take it under a closet. It has to be come out and discussed, because today woman is at 50, nobody wants to call old. Has a lack of lubrication, discomfort, and impaired function. Even in our country, women getting married at the age of 45, 46. So sexual problem is a very, very important problem to discuss. And there are lots of urinary symptoms like urgency, dysuria, and recurrent UTI. So it is a very common condition, and it has a negative impact on the life, and usually patient does not understand that there is a lack of awareness for the treatment among the public. So it is a new terminology given by the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health and the North American Menopause Society in 2014, which says that it is a chronic progressive vulvovaginal sexual and lower urinary tract condition characterized by the host of symptoms secondary to a clinical stage of hypoestrogenism after onset of the menopause. And around 15% of the premenopausal women and almost 50% of the postmenopausal women manifest this syndrome. And why we are discussing by 2030, it is not very far, we are in 2020, almost 17% of the population of the world will be, of the women become 65 years plus. So there's a huge number of the population which is going to be affected by this problem. And it is underdiagnosed due to the sexual embarrassment or the general disregard due to the associated, it has a liability of the natural aging. And it is more important for the woman who has an abrupt estrogen because of the surgical menopause or because of the chemoradiation for the cancers. And as we all know that more women are having at a younger age this breast carcinoma, and they are going to have this GSM in an earlier stage, not at the age of 60, 58, 50, but younger age around 35 or 40. So there's a big new candidates are coming where the sexual treatment for the sexual problem, the treatment is very, very important, and we have to address this sexual dysfunction. And these women has a more poorer quality of life, the outcomes. And the biggest thing is that very few women, they attribute to it, this symptom to the genitourinary syndrome of the menopause. And one European study found that only 54% of women discuss their sexual health with the practitioners. So what is the basically pathophysiology and anatomical changes we have in this genitourinary syndrome of menopause? There's the estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and the testosterone receptor found in the vagina, vestibule, urethra, trigonal bladder. This all area is full of the estrogen receptor. But the vagina, vulval tissue, they have some progesterone receptor. And what is important to know that vagina and the vulvovaginal epithelial junction has a testosterone receptor also. So with the hypoestrogenism, there's a loss of estrogen causes anatomical and the histological changes and the functional changes in form of the changes in the vagina, diminished lubricant, increase physical irritation and the trauma. And there is a physical symptoms in all of the genitourinary tissue leading because of the loss of the collagen and elastin, altered smooth muscle cell function, reduction in the number of blood vessels, and there's an increased connective tissue. And what it causes, it leads to the thinning of the epithelium, and this thinning of the epithelium, there's a diminished blood flow, reduced elasticity, and increased vaginal pH, which exposes the woman for more of the recurrent vaginal infection also because of the decreased flora, and there is a changes in the vaginal epithelial cells. Why it is important to know? Because it is a histological changes which is reverted by the newer modality like laser when it is applied for the vaginal regeneration in the postmenopausal woman. So in the premenopausal woman, we knew there is a very few parabasal cells, and the postmenopausal woman, it is full of the parabasal cells. So there's the changes in the anatomical and the functional changes of everything in the genitourinary tissue. May it is a labial or vulval fullness, to the contraction of the labia majora, to the urethral meter prominence, or even the touch perception is altered, either become hypersensitive or decreased feeling, and there's a loss of clitoral stimulation. And this alkaline pH changes the vaginal microbiome with the loss of lactobacilli. And if you see this diagram, that whole vaginal wall is flattened, and it gives rise to all those symptoms which we have discussed. But yes, there are signs which you can examine as a gynecologist. There is a decreased moisture, decreased elasticity, labia minora resorption, pallor, loss of vaginal roti, tissue fragility, urethral eversion, loss of hymen remnants, prominence of urethral meatus, introital retraction, and the recurrent urinary tract infections. So what is the risk factor? No doubt the age is the main risk factor, but all surgical intervention like the bilateral oophorectomy and cancer treatment, there's a premature ovarian failure, and smoking and alcohol abuse is very bad for the woman. Also, it was related to the decreased sexual frequency. It is found the women who are sexually active in the perimenopausal and the menopausal era, they have less of the problem than the woman who does not have any sexual activity. But before labeling that it is a GSM, it is necessary to examine the patient and see for the dermatological condition, vulvodynia, autoimmune disorder, malignancy, chronic pelvic pain. You have to rule out each and everything. Only then label this patient, this itching, this dryness, this vulvovaginal problem to the GSM. One thing is very important to score this system in GSM. The Vaginal Health Index score is a tool that by evaluating 5 parameters, vaginal elasticity, vaginal secretion, epithelial mucous membrane, and vaginal hydration, allows us to obtain a final score defining the degree of the atrophy in the genitourinary tract by the assigning a single score to each parameter, 1, 2, 3. So between 5 to 25 scoring, if it is less than 15, it is considered a vulvovaginal atrophy. There is another score is there, that is a vaginal modified vaginal health index, and it includes rugosity also, and it is almost, there's a 7 parameters. And if you see this chart, it's very easy to examine and find out. pH, you can use a litmus paper, and for most of them, your examination and you can say a visual inspection is enough to say to do the scoring. I'm talking about these things because sexual dysfunction is a very big topic which we as a gynecologist, we as a basic primary women health care provider should understand and discuss, and we should come out with the means to come with our patient that they should ask you about this, because they move around the main thing and they are not ready to talk about the sexual dysfunction directly most of the time. And this has a vaginal, the patient is having a vaginal discomfort, it leads to a negative effect on the sexual functions, and almost 40% of the women, they have an overall sexual dysfunction leading to the lack of desire, arousal difficulties, and the orgasm difficulties. And Levin et al. Reported that the postmenopausal sexually active women have 4 times more likely to have a vulvovaginal symptom than those without the sexual dysfunctions. So management of a woman with sexual dysfunction requires a more complex and multidisciplinary approach many a time. You need a clinical psychologist also, and you have to rule out other comorbidities also. But no doubt, itself GSM is a very big part, play a very big part of the sexual dysfunction in the postmenopausal women. So these lubricants and moisturizer may be recommended initially for the dryness and lubricants with the intercourse, but they are not going to help a lot to these women. Vaginal estrogens are prescribed when the severe atrophic changes are present. A study of the women health across the nation in the USA reported that the women with the sexual dysfunction consider vaginal dryness to be an important factor associated with the masturbation, pain, arousal, physical pleasure, and the emotional satisfaction. What other things we have in our pelvic floor physiotherapy, which is very, very important. Every woman, when she comes with a genital urinary syndrome problems to you, especially related with the vulvovaginal symptoms or incontinence, must send those patients to the trained pelvic floor physiotherapist for the pelvic floor physiotherapy. Many times we combine this pelvic floor physiotherapy with our other treatment, with a laser, with the regenerative things like plasma, platelet injections, or there is one more thing has come, like chairs which are introduced for the urinary incontinence, but it gives a good, it is found that they give a strength to the pelvic muscles also. And there are the vaginal trainers, and consider changing regular medication. Maybe many a time it's a side effect of the medication like antidepressants. And in the end, these patients should have a sexual therapist also if they are very active in the they are sexually active, and maybe sometime they need a couple counseling also. Now coming to the lower urinary tract dysfunction, we all know that it has a common embryonic origin, both arising from the urogenital sinus and estrogen deficiency after menopause causes lower urinary tract symptoms such as dysuria, urgency, frequency, nocturia, urinary incontinence, and recurrent UTI. And many a time these patients, they go pillar to post having so many urinary culture, antibiotics, but basically they don't need these things. What they need a proper treatment of the GSM and the regeneration of the urogenital epithelium. So it is a chronic and rarely resolved spontaneously and often progress if left untreated. Although it is not a life-threatening condition, but it causes a very poor quality of life for these postmenopausal women, having a negative affecting self-esteem and intimacy with their partner, leading to a depression and a social orchestration. So another study, closer study, found that vaginal discomfort had a direct negative impact on the intimacy of both partners and resulted in the loss of libido in a men and women both. And women reported that their vaginal symptoms negatively affected enjoyment of the sexual activities, sleep, and overall enjoyment of the life. This line is very, very important. So this GSM is affecting quality of life in general also, not only in their own rooms. So these symptoms are related to an abrupt menopause tend to present in the relatively younger women, as I have discussed to you, and cause greater sexual dysfunction and poorer quality of life outcomes. And we all as a gynecologist knows the causes of the abrupt menopause. And today what is basically most important is the cancer treatment in the younger population, where it is very, very difficult to advise the hormonal treatment to these patients, especially hormonal sensitive tumors. Management of the GSM must ideally be tailored to the individual patient. We cannot say one treatment is for each and every one. It is a customized treatment. We have to take the medical history, potential risks to be explained, and find out benefits of the exogenously administered estrogen therapy to be discussed, and we have to take the account of the patient lifestyle. And because it is a chronic condition, lifelong management is essential to prevent recurrence of the symptom, because it is the first question from each and every patient. How long? How long? Because it is a condition which is going to be with you for the rest of the life. Your hormones are not going to come back permanently. So you need a lifelong management, and accordingly you have to go for it. So primary goal is to relieve the symptoms, and no doubt estrogen is the most effective therapy, and lowest dose for the shorter duration is recommended. Usually local treatment is sufficient, but it is different for the different patients and depend on the strength of the medicine, number of the doses, and the time allowed between doses, and the left of the time depend on the medical problem for which medicine is being used. So you can see from this diagram, we have a conjugated estrogen, estradiol, and for the estrone, and the doses are different for everything. So coming to the other option, other than the estrogen we are using, and it is a very wonderful option, we have selective estrogen receptor modulator, that is osmifene, tissue-specific estrogen complex, and laser therapy, which we are going to discuss in detail, Tubulon and DHEA to increase the epithelial thickness and the secretion for the local use only. But it is very, very important to educate, and there is a certain role of the cognitive behavioral therapy is also there, which we should also add in our treatment. Now the things are very, very changing. We are not only a prescription doctor, we should always have a holistic, complete approach, because being totally going for a prescription doctor has taken many things out of our practice. People think we only know that we have to write something. We send the dietitian, we send the patient to the physiotherapist, to the clinical psychologist, and so-called the holistic doctors. Why not? We have to take everything in account and make our own prescription using everything. And these other therapists, we have to guide. Now you have a consult from them, but basic knowledge is very, very important for a holistic treatment for us. So lubricant and moisturizer, they have their role, but not very much in the GSM. There's a role of the self-stimulators and the dilators when we talk about the sexual dysfunction in the GSM. And I always focus for the pelvic floor physical therapy with my all treatment in combination, which is really wonderful, which patient can do in between, and many times it prolong the reuse of the laser session also. So first osmifene is the first non-hormonal SERM which is approved for the treatment of the VVA, and NAMs include this agent in the treatment of the moderate to severe dyspareunia, and it possesses a distinctive mix of the estrogenic and the anti-estrogenic tissue-specific effects. It is the only agent with a nearly full estrogen agonist effect on the vagina, but neutral and the slight estrogenic effect in the endometrium, which is very, very important to know. And effects on the BMD, it has an estrogenic effect on the confirming of comparable bone restoring activity. It has no adverse effect on the breast, or mammograms performed after 52 weeks of the osmifene are normal in the all groups, and uterus and endometrium, no cases of the endometrial carcinoma was reported. It is, the dose is the 60 milligram per day, but the safety profile, which was based on a study with the treatment, is only 52 weeks, not longer than that. Now coming to the lasers in the GSM, we are discussing lasers in last session in detail by the our own Dr. Malhotra, and we all know that the laser treatment with the fractional carbon dioxide and the erbium laser and the hybrid laser is in the market. We all using the fractionated carbon dioxide laser. Why? That I will tell you in the next slides. What it does, it activates the heat shock and tissue growth factors to stimulate new collagen synthesis and new vascularization with the vaginal epithelium. Most evidence on the laser therapy comes from the prospective case series with the small numbers and the short-term follow-up with no comparison arm. And that is the main point of the discussion. Why it was discussed with the many association, there is no comparison arm. The thing is that it is a new thing, it is an expensive tool, it is very, very difficult to go for the comparison arms, but the reports are coming in. And maybe in future, we have all those studies. This role of the laser for the carbon dioxide fractionated laser comes almost in 2010, first time by the Mona Lisa laser, and it is in the market for last 9 to 10 years and giving a very, very good results. Even NAMS in few of its publication has endorsed it also. A recent trial by the Cruz and colleagues, however, is notable because it is one of the first published studies that compared vaginal laser with the vaginal estrogen alone and with the combination of the laser plus estrogen arm. What we are needed, these type of the random controlized lasers. Here, there is a one arm has a carbon dioxide laser, another has a estrol cream, and another arm has a carbon dioxide laser and the plus estrol cream. So primary outcome include a change in the visual analog scale score of the symptoms related to the vulvovaginal atrophy, and assessments were made at the baseline at the age of 20 weeks. And secondary outcomes include the objective of FSFI score to evaluating the sexual dysfunction scores, and cytological smears are also taken. So it was found that the microablative fractional carbon dioxide laser therapy for the management of the GSM achieved a statistically significant improvement in all GSM symptoms, including the 10 centimeter visual analog scale, according to a study in the journal Menopause. There is an FDA warning. These devices are neither cleared nor approved by the FDA for this specific indication, although this machine is approved for the excision, cauterization inside the vaginal and cervical erosions and other tumors. So we can use this machine very safely, approved by FDA for bigger things, going deeper without causing any problems. And this particular thing only go 4 to 6 millimeter below the epithelium, not causing any problem, no burn. Till today, we are almost 20 doctors who are using in India, even more are coming. Nobody till today have any burn in any patient. So I just go through with a few of the PubMed articles: vaginal regeneration, laser for the pelvic floor dysfunction, laser therapy for the restoration of the vaginal function, laser therapy as a treatment modality for the GNS, GSM. So we have lots and lots supporting evidence on the net also. So laser is well tolerated and may increase the thickness of the squamous epithelium and improve vascularity of the vagina. These morphological changes presumably elevate symptoms of the dryness, dyspareunia, and the irritation. The only thing, you have to customize your laser use in each and every patient, because the older patient, their vagina is very narrow and their membrane is very, very thin. So might be initially use a very low energy and not go for your robotic arm, but use the manual arm, which is very, very slim. So instead of this bigger arm, which is on the screen, you have to use a very small arm. And this added advantage of using this laser in the post-cancer treated patient for the following radiotherapy, the breast cancer survival, wherein hormone therapy is contraindicated, or no patient is going to ready for the hormone therapy if she is a hormone receptor positive. So non-invasive procedure hai. So there is a decreased estrogen production during the perimenopause period, reduces the fibroblast activity, causing dermis atrophy. With age, human skin becomes visible, lax, losing its previous volume and shape, and the loss of firmness and water may promote injuries or the infections. This vulvovaginal dryness is a common complaint, especially in the women who do not use the HRT. And it also leads to the labial atrophy due to the loss of the subcutaneous adipose tissue. Now, this most of the labial atrophy causes the gaping in the vaginal introitus and leaves more of the dryness in the vaginal canal. So, meeting these diverse medical challenges with one solution is a complete solution that treats a wide range of the feminine indication, whether it is vaginal tightening, SUI, vaginal dryness, or what we are talking and stressing is the postmenopausal syndrome. And we can use this instrument for the post-delivery rehabilitation also. It is from where we have gained all this insight from the dermatology, where it was used on the face, neck, and the chest to produce new collagen and elastin fiber. And in September 2014, FDA cleared this laser system for in-season, excision, and vaporization and coagulation of the body part in the medical specialty, including gynecology and the genitourinary surgery. This technology involves emitting a beam of light that creates a pattern of the small ablative wounds without damaging the surrounding tissue, which aims to stimulate tissue regeneration, and it is delivered to the target tissue through a specifically designed scanner. What happened? This beam goes towards the tissue and passes from a scanner, and it forms a small pixel of 9 to 9 millimeter spot size. And this thermal effect is achieved in the microscopic column surrounded by the spear tissue from which the healthy cells are recruited and accelerates the healing. You think of a small burned hole, and from those burned hole, there's nearby healthy tissue regenerate those burning hole. It's a very superficial burn. And advantage is minimally invasive, virtually painless procedure, gentle treatment for the controlled safety, maximum precision with a carbon dioxide laser, right wavelength, and the perfect pulse. There's a fast, efficient delivery of the fractional laser energy, no post-treatment downtime, and excellent patient satisfaction and the long-term success. But always, before buying any instrument, study it, understand its technology, and never go for any machine, whether it is the carbon dioxide laser or RF or any other laser, unless it is a properly approved machine. Because you are putting yourself at risk, your patient at risk. So what it causes, the effect of the laser on the tissue causes the photostimulation, photodynamic reactions, and the thermolytic actions. And this laser therapy in turn enter in the cell's mitochondria and absorbed by the chromophores. The chromophore is very important for any laser therapy. In face we use for melanin, and in vagina we use water as a chromophore. And this chromophore absorb the heat and protein cytochrome C oxidase, which increases activity. So laser irradiation causes absorption, something is reflect out, and some energy is scattered and some energy is transmitted to the tissue, causes the water heating, and finally this is the water heating, the thermal changes, which leads to this regeneration and collagen remodeling. So this is a high powered laser, utilization of the much higher energy levels, and the microscopic columns of the thermal zone penetrates deep into the submucosa, leaving the surrounding tissue intact with a minimal ablation. And actually, along with the thermal damage, superficial shrinkage, it causes a deep aseptic wound. So you have to remember, finally you are making a wound, whether it is aseptic. So before using laser, my own tips, although it is not given from the company, I tell each and every my patient, please, before 15 days, you start using condom. I always go with a vaginal culture, and after that report, if it is a totally sterile, only I go with the treatment, and tell my all patient to use condom after this at least for 15 days. Because I don't want any kind of infection coming to the patient from any source. So what is the action process? It has 3 phases. Phase 1, within 48 to 72 hours, it is an early thermal effect. Phase 2 in the following 30 days, that is the proliferation, and phase 3 is after 30 to 40 days, that is the remodeling. And these things very, very important. What is the patient's nutritional status? What is the status of the vaginal wall? The effect is very variable. Every patient does not have a 90% effect. So your counseling is very, very important when you are taking a patient. Spend time with your patient before taking patient for the laser. Give her time to even reconsider, because today we are working with something like a warning, something like all the regulatory bodies, they are not coming with some guidelines. So you have to be very open with your patient, give them enough time, give them the evidence, and let them decide and come back to you. But as far as we user, we know there's a good effect and there's a physiological and the functional recovery of the vaginal mucosa is there. This is shown many times because we don't have our own diagrams. And this is a young mucosa, is almost like a post-treatment old mucosa. And we all know that it has effect in the urethral support also. The next down the line, third lecture is by Dr. Lalita, is in detail for the urinary incontinence. So there's many other studies for the histological study on the effect of the microablative laser for the atrophic vaginital tissue. There's another study for this thing, the effect of the laser on the vaginal flora, which is very, very important. So what is today's word? Every single patient is a litigant. Always remember. So proper consent is must. It is fundamental. It is a medical process. It is no magical band. You are basically a medical doctor, and history, examination, contraindication, then counseling, fully informed consent, and very, very transparent discussion with the patient is very, very important. And women should be advised accordingly. I give that FDA warning also to them. And never treat a woman less than 18 years for anything, not for the GSM, otherwise also for any laser treatment, any aesthetic treatment, a big no for women less than 18 years. Always remember, contraindication, pap smear is must. You have to rule out that your woman, your patient is not having any kind of the chronic malignancy before your treatment. So, as there is also said in the last lecture, it is an office procedure. It's a common procedure, in and out procedure. No anesthesia is required. But yes, if your woman is sensitive, you can give a little bit Pyralox on the introitus, because it is the introitus which is going to have a little bit heat problem. Always down your energy when you're coming to the introitus. Never start more than 5, especially in the older woman. And the moment patient said to you that she's feeling any heat or she's not comfortable, take out your things. And please don't lubricate the vagina with any type of the water-based lubricants before inserting your probe, because water is the chromophore for the laser, and that laser absorbs that energy in the upper level of the vagina, and that can lead to heat and the burning. So 2 to 3 passes of the entire vaginal canal, 3 sessions, 1 month interval. But initially we give in the only 2-3 passes, and that increases the session. Many times I go for the 3 to 4 to 5 session, and in the younger woman I give the 3 to 4 pass in 1 session. So when you start using, you change your practice according how you're getting the results. But 1 month interval is must, and patient require the memory session after a year, maybe after 1.5 years, and may need a full course after 2 years or so. To conclude, the genitourinary syndrome of the menopause is the latest terminology to increase the awareness and the reduce social stigma of the genitourinary sequelae and sexual dysfunction. It is the mainstay of the medical treatment, but the laser therapy is a recent method for the treatment of the symptomatic vulvar and vaginal atrophy. It leads to a collagen remodeling and the rejuvenation, neovascularization. And with the neovascularization, what happened that the basal cell fall off and there's a more regeneration of the superficial cell in these women. And these superficial cells have more of the glycogen content, and that leads, this glycogen content is the food for the lactobacillus, and it makes our environment of the vagina more healthy, more pliable vagina. This labor therapy is introduced extensively to the healthcare practitioner directly to the consumer. So further research is needed in the form of the controlled studies of the laser and other non-hormonal GSM therapy controlled studies. So thank you very much to all sources from where I have taken many points and many slides. Thank you all participants being here, listening me. And thank you organizer and INSAG for giving me this opportunity. I will finish with this quote: the man who will neither play or nor do business unless everything is just to his liking and notion retards rather than the contributes to the progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ragini, ma'am, for this enlightening session. So crisply presented, ma'am. I guess GSM now we have a better understanding and a better thought
Hello.
process.
So a fantastic talk, Dr. Ragini, and so clearly explained about the GSM and how the newer energy-based devices, especially fractionated carbon dioxide laser, can help. We can take some questions. If some questions have come, we will be very, very glad to answer those.
Yes, sir. So this question is on refractory cases of vulvodynia, sir. So if one query is, if it's a refractory vulvodynia with all causes ruled out, how, does fractional CO2 laser help in this? And if yes, then what is your experience?
Yeah,
So, yes, Dr. Ragini, you say first, because I already spoke this in my talk, but then you can repeat again.
So we all have a 1, 2, or 5, not so many of the patient of the vulvodynia, but if everything is ruled out, and these vulvodynia patients, they wonderfully respond to this treatment. But the problem with the vulvodynia patient is to use this laser without any sedation. What is your experience, sir?
See, what I have done is only some local spray, xylocaine spray, and then used laser. Because one very severe vulvodynia came to me who won't even let touch. Even the touch would cause severe pain. And once we could convince her to go for a laser, the second sitting she was much better. She took it without any anesthesia, without any. So sometimes maybe you have to give anesthesia also.
Sir, I would like to add one thing. I have done around 6 cases of vulvodynia, and in them, if you apply Priolex gel, just 45 minutes prior, it numbs the area quite sufficiently. And as sir said rightly, that after first sitting, they are much better, and 3 to 4 sittings most of them makes them quite okay.
Yeah. So what I do, I give most of the patient one Alprex for this thing, and in the assessment, if I found that patient is really not allow me to touch at all, so I have done only 3 cases. One is with the IV sedation, and one patient with this local spray, and third patient I have to treat for the GA also.
Actually, we don't actually have to touch them the first time because the scanner has to come from a distance. So if you're able to counsel them and keep on talking to them and divert them, then doing the first sitting after applying local anesthetic is usually manageable, but then every case depends.
Yeah, second,
I too do use a local anesthetic before starting the case, because I've seen that it really helps. Talking to the patient time and again, telling them what is going to happen, what they are going to feel, what they are not going to feel, counseling them before, and using a small probe if it is for the introitus is what really helps the patient.
Yeah.
And we've seen excellent results with the vulvodynia.
Yeah, and in vulvodynia, if it's pure vulvodynia, then vulva you don't even touch, like with the scanner from a distance you can do, so they are comfortable. But at the same sitting, if you want to do the vaginal lasing also, then of course probably some sedation might be required.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I've been listening to all of you. Great discussions. And I totally agree because, this local anesthesia is definitely required. And it should be.
Yes, definitely, because it will cause pain, because the vulva has lots of nerve fibers, and with the laser they will feel a lot of pain and discomfort. So please do not do without local anesthesia, and they are available in jelly forms, ointment forms, so you don't have to prick the patient. Yeah.
That Furlox and all, which we normally with facial hair also, which people use,
Yes,
it works very well. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
You have to remove that Pylox very, very properly. Remove it properly and dry that area before applying the laser. Should not be wet. No water should be there in that area. This is very important when you are using a laser in private part.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctors. The next question is on the RF technology in your experience in GSM.
So I can't say that I have ever used RF for the vaginal thing, because I don't have that RF probe for the vagina. But it's not my personal experience. Neither whatever I have read that GSM for RF, but other friends who are using the RF, they say that it is equally good, because the basic thing is the heating of the thermal water thermal index has to be increased. Any one of you, if you are having a RF probe, can come, because I don't have my personal.
So RF can be used, but the problem with RF is those disposable probes. It's very, very expensive. So that's a major problem.
And so time is also
and
a big
the time
issue.
and the fractionated laser will work more, because you can do the SUI plus you can do the vaginal rejuvenation at the same sitting.
Yes,
So
RF, sorry sir, the RF alone is good for probably vaginal rejuvenation, but as sir rightly said, it takes long time, 30 to 40 minutes, and you have to do lots of passes. It's a little uncomfortable because that probe is just going in and out. It's not a good feeling for the patient. Secondly, with that, the SUI relief is not that much as is with the CO2 fractionated laser. So we are serving two purposes if we are using laser.
RF is good for the, I can say, for the vulval tightening, for the vulval bleaching. It has a good effect, no doubt, because we have other, for the dermal thing, we have a RF, and it gives a good result.
Right.
Especially facial and all, RF is wonderful.
So ma'am, taking this question ahead, how many sessions in SUI and at what intervals do you suggest the treatments to be planned for?
So more or less, if we see, the protocol is same. 3 session, 1 month interval, 2-3 passes, memory session, then repeat after 1-2 years. But the thing is that what we have found, even that day sir was also telling, that with our own experience, we have changed the protocols, and most of us not giving 3 passes per 4 or 5 passes. What is your experience, sir?
If it is genuine stress incontinence, I do 3 passes only SUI, that is on the under urethra, and 2 passes of complete vagina. So total 5 passes, 3 plus 2. That way we are doing, not more than that.
And secondly, our patient has a SUI, and I think it is not very milder one, a little bit say mild to moderate variety. Usually not only laser, I inject platelet also. And
we do that. We do with all of them. PRP.
Yeah.
And I send those patients for the pelvic physiotherapy also.
Definitely yes.
Yes.
Always think.
Always a combination approach.
Combination always works. We know not only we give a doxy, we give metro also, we give a probiotic also to treat the PID. So like this, the patient needs many things. Patient have those musculature also, which is totally torn during the birth, or it's such a small muscle. With the pelvic physiotherapy and the laser combination, I have a better result in SUI. Almost
definitely yes.
Yes, definitely yes.
Yes.
Ma'am,
you have to see the age also. If they are the older age, use less passes. If they are younger, then 5 passes is a good idea.
Yeah. So I think we have a question. Savita Mahesh is asking about disposable probes. Now with fractionated FemiLift laser, only the cover is plastic, which can be changed for a patient. With the RF, the problem is the whole probe has to be changed. So the cost of the whole probe is much more with RF therapy rather than with the fractionated laser. It's only the cover, and she can use the same cover for the 3 sittings and for the memory sittings after a year, after 2 years. So that cover can be stored and re-sterilized for that same patient, not for the other patients. So that is how we do it. Savita, have we answered your question?
Savita, basically, what sir has told you, what is the difference between the RF and the fractionated laser? We are taking all precaution, no transmission. The cover is the plastic, which is changeable. It costs you something like 4,000 bucks for all 3 sessions, even for the memory session also. And here you are charging, I don't know exact amount, but it is something like 20,000 plus for the probe when you change for the RF.
So RF, the cost is much more because of the probe.
Ma'am, there is also a concern on FDA in the past. So how do you address this?
FDA, I think Dr. Ragni very clearly addressed
Right,
the FDA has approved it for vaginal use for things more serious than only vaginal toning. It is approved for skin. It is approved for face. It is approved for intra-abdominal use, the laser. So there should be no problem with that.
The thing is that we do many things which is FDA does not approve for a bigger thing. We use misoprostol for the labor induction and never thought of FDA approval.
no approval ever.
Today, anything which new comes, it causes a furor and then it settles down. When the laparoscopy came, the Kurtzam has sent to the asylum. That is a madman. And today, the doctor who doesn't know the laparoscopy is not a good surgeon. Is not a surgeon at part. So the thing will settle down. And the main thing we have to think about our patient. If anything which comes and does not have a bad effect on the patient, it will be accepted after a year or 2.
And see, more than 10 years of use, not a single side effect has been reported in the world. Nowhere.
And the laser has been used on the face for so long. And as Ragni ma'am just said that the penetration is so less in the vagina. So when we can use it on the face, then what is the problem with the vaginal lasing for the rejuvenation? Yeah.
So ma'am, the next question is on labral bleaching and rejuvenation. So some pictures were showed by Dr. Tanuja. So they are keen on knowing how the management and how do you all manage labral bleaching and labral rejuvenation? Thank you.
So what this patient whose pic I had shown, we had used a light scan probe and it was 2.5 watts, 1.4 milliseconds, number of pulses 2 and density of 3 or 4. 21 days apart, of course, 3 sessions that she took. But what I did with this particular patient is I also used a serum for lightening. In between, after a week, we are using cojoic acid and hydrophobic modified calcium agglutinaate.
Right. Thank you, ma'am.
Again, it goes back to being a combination therapy. It's not one that works. You have to use it with the serum, with your light scan, and that is what gives the effect.
And people should understand it's not magic. You do a pass on the face, and suddenly your face from dark black will become absolutely white. It doesn't work like that. So it'll go by shades, and that with a combination therapy, and it takes time to lighten the skin.
Also, one has to prepare the skin before going for laser because Indian skin is type 4, type 5. So do not directly use the laser, prep the skin with some ointments as Dr. Tanuja just said, and then use the laser. Because if you directly use the laser, you can have rebound, darkening or hyperpigmentation. So just be very careful.
And one more thing, please, commercially freely available Fair and Lovely type of creams not to be used. Proper dermatologist or a cosmetic gynecology consult and use pharmaceutical products, not beauty products.
Yeah.
These three
Uh,
things I want to give you. Always remember 3 points. Never tell the patient that it is you are going to do a miracle. Always understatement. And this documentation is must. Never promise too much. Number two, always take a history of the comorbidities like the PCOD and diabetes. Because if those patients, there's a PCOD, obesity and diabetes, here the results are not very good. And third thing you have to see about the fungal infections. The fungal infection also leads to the blackness. So you have to rule out these things, and it is just a darkening. Only then you are going to this wonderful result what Tanuja has shown you.
Yes. But laser does make the skin very smooth and nice if you use it
Yes.
properly. Even if when you're doing it for vulvodynia or this other thing, then you'll see that even if you didn't want the whitening, the skin becomes very nice. The
Yes.
vulval skin.
If
Yeah.
you're using for other conditions like I had shown about seborrheic keratosis, there was a whitening effect too.
Yeah.
So
In
you
lichen,
want it or
yeah.
not, there is a whitening effect.
Yes. I have used it in lichen sclerosis, and along with curing that, otherwise the appearance also improves. That's a nice effect.
Yes.
Lichen sclerosis has had a little bit pigmentation going other than the lighting. It becomes pigmented.
Yeah, it improves that also.
Yeah, it improves that also.
So, doctors, in your opinion, with regards to PRP, do you use it in SUI and any specific sites you inject, or how do you use it, please?
So who'll take this? Now PRP already, if you're using a fractionated laser, you already made micro holes in the whole of the vaginal mucosa. So you just have to smear the PRP in the vagina, not inject it. When we do for clitoral, G-spot, local, then you of course have to inject it in that area with a syringe and a needle. But for vaginal rejuvenation, SUI, just smear it in the vagina. It will go into the micro holes which you already made with your fractionated laser.
Because
And
with the
for
laser, it
SUI,
is just not possible. It
for
is just
SUI you
SUI,
can inject under the urethra, yes, with the injection.
at
With the
3
syringe.
o'clock, at 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, if you inject with a small fine needle, you will see a bleb, and it really helps. And rest you can just smear, as Sir just said.
For labial rejuvenation, any separate protocols?
So
Labial.
I think this question was addressed to me by the photo that they had seen, by the pic. So it was the Femidite defocus probe that was used, 5 watts, 50 milliseconds on and off time, and on repeat mode. Again, 21 days apart. The pic that I have shown was taken just after 2 settings, and after that it is far more improved. So this is my take on labia majora tightening.
Thank you, ma'am. Doctors, any other sharings?
Someone has just asked for clitoral
Yes,
disease.
sir.
Now what they want exactly, if it is clitoromegaly, if it is too big, it has to be surgically corrected. If there is a hood problem or a phimosis, it has to be surgically corrected. You can use the laser cutting to use it, but non-invasive, I don't know what exactly they want, which disease to be addressed with the clitoris.
Dr. Vadvan, if you could please type in the chat box, what exactly are you looking at with the clitoral issues?
And Tanuja showed some amplifications, for sexual dysfunctions. You can use it there. You can do laser and PRP and even hyaluronidase and threads, and all those things can be used in these areas. But you have to be very careful and know the anatomy properly, because this area is very vascular. So you don't have to go very deep if you're using needles to inject things. But with laser, it's going only 6 millimeters, and it just causes a non-infective inflammation and an increase in collagen tissue. So that's very safe.
Right, sir. There is a sharing from Dr. Govind Rajan, and in some well-being study that was performed, the equivalency of the estrogens and creams and this laser was the same.
No. I would not
No, I don't
agree
agree
with
to
it.
that.
This was
Abhi,
the study which I have presented
even
you.
Ragini just showed you the study.
We have shown that
Yeah.
study. That is the only study which is available.
So it's only one, and there are 10 which says there's no effect of
But
estrogen.
what I have
You
found
have to, sorry, ma'am.
we are giving those patients estrogen cream for many years. I have few older women which are with me for many years and using off and on estrogen cream, and then again coming back. Them I offered this laser, and they didn't come back for a year for use of the estrogen cream. So I think there is
Also,
something which is different when we do the laser. Maybe with the time we will come with the more of the studies and the evidence.
Ma'am, I would like to add the laser, the basic principle is that it causes collagen and elastin rejuvenation. So the main issue why you are using estrogen is because of the atrophy of the vaginal mucosa. Now with the laser, that whole vaginal mucosa rejuvenates. If you see your own patient even after first sitting, you'll see that the parchment like white thing totally disappears, which never does with the estrogen alone. And secondly, when the rejuvenation has taken place, then the basic cause is removed and patients are relieved. So estrogen is good, but it can never get that effect which laser is doing. Estrogen is symptomatic effect and the laser is the rejuvenation.
Yes, I agree with that. What I have been doing is that every patient of mine who undergoes a hysterectomy too
Yeah.
goes on to the laser therapy, so that they don't go into all these symptoms later.
Yes.
So they're
Yes.
dedicated to prevention, which is better, and the quality of life is improved tremendously.
Oh yes,
I think
definitely.
we should not let them go through what they go through perimenopause and menopause, and help them prevent it completely, circumvent it completely.
Even after
Dr. Rimi
deliveries.
Singla is raising her hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you unmute her and let's see what she wants to say, comment? Or she can type, Dr. Rimi.
Also with the laser, even after deliveries, I am offering this that after their vaginal births or even after cesarean, after 6 weeks, they should take one sitting of laser, which prevents their dyspareunia and other symptoms from developing, and also it helps in their SUI. So we are offering to all our delivery patients and post-hysterectomy patients as well.
Dr. Remy, we have unmuted you. Please go ahead with your queries.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Hello,
Good evening,
Rimi.
Rimi.
Hanji sir, I just want to share my experience. I have HIFU, high frequency focus ultrasound, that I'm using for my all patients postpartum and post hysterectomy. And I'm getting very good results. Like I'm doing TLH routinely in all my to many patients. Like I have a good rate of total hysterectomy, and after that, many patients they came with dyspareunia, and I have used HIFU in that patients. I'm getting very good results. This I just want to share. Like
Yeah, because
So good.
the basic principle. Yeah, sorry, sir.
We
carry
had a
on.
major session on HIFU yesterday, and I was a part of that international discussion for use of HIFU in fibroids and tumors and pancreatic. So this is a new technique which is coming. You had the MRI guided HIFU previously. Now we have the ultrasound guided HIFU.
ultrasound guided,
Now,
yes, sir.
so ultrasound guided HIFU is easier to use and more easy to learn and not so costly. The only issue I see is because with HIFU you have to focus on certain areas.
Yes.
With CO2 laser, with one pass you're going all circular. Here you'll have to focus the energy, focus fire, focus, fire, focus,
You
fire.
have to basically you have to fix your shots, sir. Like how many
Yeah,
shots you want to give it to the
so that,
patient.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
so
Actually,
that is,
I'm using both the things. So HIFU as because you have to target the thing and you have to give the shots with the CO2 laser, as sir is just saying, it goes all around.
all around.
Secondly, HIFU is very good for the cellulite and for the what I have observed. It's good
Yes.
for the cellulite lifting and skin lifting, jaw lifting. But for vaginal also, because the basic principle is increasing the thermal, giving the thermal heat. So that you can give by any source. So when I compare my patients, I find CO2 laser it gives results much earlier, and it is less time consuming, and
Simpler
it
to
is
use.
simpler to use, and patient also gets very good results, satisfactory results as far as vaginal part is concerned very early.
Correct.
Less painful than the HIFU.
Yeah.
HIFU is little more painful.
And
Yeah.
a little cumbersome, I think, because you focus
Little
and then
cumbersome.
fire, and then focus and then fire.
Yeah, and you
But
have
the
to
results
change
will
that
be good.
probe. Yeah, result
Yes.
will be good, but takes longer time, little more
Yeah.
cumbersome.
Correct.
And somehow I find CO2 laser much easier. For
Correct.
face,
But-
I find HIFU good.
It's expensive too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Doctors, there's a question. If in your practice, do you use estrogen creams post laser treatment for vaginal dryness?
Yes, estrogen cream anyway can be used for so many reasons, and both of them are acting in a different way. Laser or any energy-based device is basically causing rejuvenation, and those estrogen creams are acting locally to avoid dryness. So you can very well use it if there is no contraindication.
Thing is
But
that
after two sittings, you will not need it.
Yes, you will not need it. Yeah.
but
Ma'am, and then do you all advocate the use of the estrogen cream post the laser?
not all patients.
Not
No,
always.
not at all.
Not at all.
It's not
Thank you.
required because the laser cures them. So they don't need to use. Even if I give them, initially I used to give them because I did not have that much confidence on laser. Then patient would come after 2 sittings and say, ma'am, I don't need it now. So they don't need it.
There is a question, doctors, from Dr. Ghazal Dada. This probably I should direct to Mr. Rohit Gandhare from Alma Medical. It's regarding the cost of the technology. So, Dr. Ghazal Dada, we'll get back to you on this.
People attending the webinar will get a discount.
And also, sir, we can announce that INSARG is, we have
Yeah,
formed.
please announce the INSARG conference before we close it.
Yeah, the INSARG is Indian Society of Aesthetic and Regenerative Gynecology. We have made it a national society with lots of international people on board. And we are going to open the membership soon. Actually, the bank accounts were almost about to open when the lockdown happened. So once the lockdown is over, the membership will be open, and you can just WhatsApp me your details, and we can make you the members of it. And its first annual conference as of now is happening in October, but then in June, depending on the COVID situation, we will get back to you whether it is happening or it's getting postponed, depending.
So fantastic session. Thank you, Dr. Agni and Tanuja, for the beautiful lectures, and thank you, Preeti, for joining us and answering a lot of questions. Thank you, Alma, for supporting this every Thursday INSARG on her unspoken problems. So next Thursday, we meet you again at the same time, at the same link. Goodbye to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, sir.
See you again on the next Thursday.
Thank you.
Next
Thank you,
Thursday.
doctors. Thank you for addressing the questions. With
Hello, Manju.
Hi Ragni, कैसी हो?
Good to see you after such a long time. It is a bonus.
I was watching you. You spoke so well. I was waving hand ki so that मैं बात कर सकूं तुझसे.
It's wonderful. I just saw it.
Yes.
Manju.
Huh? It's so nice to watch you.
So it's good. We are connected from the Australia.
That's true. That's true.
Good, good.
और बताओ क्या हाल है? You are doing very well.
Thank you so much. Let's connect. Now we can connect on the Zoom directly also.
Yes.
Make a
Yes.
group and connect. Okay?
और बताओ. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye bye. We'll talk personally. Bye
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
See you again. Bye bye.
Bye bye.